Hi everybody, welcome back to my channel, So Stylish with Elsie. Now for our Tuesday tips, we have been talking about decorative stitches, looking at what you have on your machine and seeing how you can work with it to create a decorative effect. We also touched last week on if you've got your normal mechanical machine, and I just wanted to mention this because I did get the question. Mechanical machine is really the machine that's got limited stitches on it, and you usually have a dial. You've got to go and turn and select what is your stitch length, what is your stitch width, and you'll also have a dial that you turn to go and select your stitches as well. Our electronic machines that we have it's almost like the entry into computerized. The electronic, everything is preset for you. So if you choose a stitch, it will be preset on a certain stitch length and a certain stitch width. When I start talking about computerized, now that is totally different again, because on those ones I usually have my touch screen and it offers me more functions because it's like a little computer. And if I'm looking specifically at what we're going to do today, double needle work on my machine, I can tell it I've selected a double needle. It will recalculate that stitch width for me, and that is why it is great that we can now start working with our decorative stitches as well. If you are working on your mechanical machine, which is more the manual machine where you've got to go set your settings, you've just got to be careful when you are working with double needle and you want to do decorative work. Now, we usually use the double needle a lot for hemming, and usually with those mechanical machines, you would only have maybe used it to do your straight stitch where you are hemming a garment. And if you are going to do decorative, you've got to make sure that whatever stitch you choose, because a decorative stitch have got a width to that stitch, you've got to go and test it. You have got to go and turn this flywheel on the side, and you've got to make sure that your needle is not going to hit the foot. Remember, it's not a needle now that's central or in the center anymore. I've got two needle switches on either side of that middle point where I usually would have my sewing needle. So I've got to now consider what must the width be if you're on a mechanical machine. So you've got to go to a smaller stitch width, and you are going to test. You are literally going to turn the flywheel, see is it clearing my presser foot. If it goes to the left, is it clearing the presser foot? If not, smaller width again. But also what we do find with those machines, you are not going to be able to use a double needle that is wider than 2.5 millimeters. That's how far they are separated. As soon as you go with electronic machines that's allowing a wider stitch width, now I'm not talking about the 4.5 or the 5 millimeter stitch width. Those machines will sometimes allow you to go up to a 7 millimeter. Now there you can start playing and maybe bring in the 3 or the 4 millimeter as well. My machine specifically does a 9 millimeter stitch width, so I can really go quite wide with it. But again, if I'm working with my decorative stitches, I tend to either work with a 2.5 or a 4 millimeter spacing. And now I'm going to show you what these double needles look like so that you can understand where are you going to get all this information if I'm talking about a 2.5 width or a 4 millimeter width. Now first off, if we look at double needles, on the double needles, and you will also see the photo that I'm showing you, I've either got a blue or I've got a little red plastic section just above the needle, and that is telling me one is for a universal needle, so that will be the red. If it has blue on it, it's for a stretch needle. Remember, that allows for me to work on different fabrics because the point of that needle is specifically for that fabric. So be aware that if you are working a lot of knits, go with the blue one, because you might get skipped stitches if you are going with your red, with that red one as well. Now the next thing that I want you to have a look at, because you might have one of the double needles with you now as well, on the double needle it will also give you information, and it will usually say 2.5 and a /75, or it might say 2.580. As soon as I go wider, here I've got one that is specifically a 4 millimeter. Some of them will still say 80, some will say 90. So that first one, that smaller number, your 2.5 or your 4, will be the spacing between the two needles. Then that other number, the 80 or the 70 or the 90, that is telling me the needle size. And remember, with working with fabric, the thicker the fabric, the bigger the number must be. So if I've got this one that specifically says it's a 90 needle, that means I can really go slightly thicker fabric. If it's a 80, it's usually my medium weight, my normal cottons, my linens, anything like that. We even have in stock one which is for jeans. It is specifically a jeans. It does have a blue on it, but it specifically says jeans double needle. So the width is 4 millimeter, and then also the needle has got the sharper point because it's a jeans needle, but it's also a thicker needle because it says a 90 or /100. So that is the information that we look for on here. And when you're going to buy, if you don't have a needle yet, again, consider what you are buying. 2.5 or 4 is your most popular. So I went ahead and I played because I wanted to show you what does the two needles look like when we stitch it out. And there's really a big difference. So first off, when we move to the machine now, I'm first going to talk to you about what we do when we're sewing with a double needle, how we thread it, because I would really do the normal path where I just split my threads really at the bottom, which I'm going to show you now as well. And we've got to look at a lower speed. We can't go and sew full speed. We need to again look at stabilizing. So we, like last week when we spoke about decorative stitches, you need to stabilize the back. So let's move to the machine now. I'm going to talk to you about threading it, and then I'm going to show you some of the stitches that I played with already. Now I'm going to be threading for a twin needle. So I've got my horizontal spool, which is the one that I would usually work with. So I've got my one thread on there, and then I've got my extra spool that's up on this position. Now some of your machines will maybe somewhere around here have a little opening so you can put your extra spool pin in. Specifically, I would say some of our mechanical machines as well. Now all you have to do is you're just going to put it in. You're going to then have both your threads. I've got two separate colors because I want to show you what it looks like. On this area we've got a little plate there to go and separate, put one to the left, one to the right. I'm going to be honest with you, I don't really worry too much about that. For me, it hasn't had such an effect. For me, it's important to separate it here at the bottom before I go to the needle, which I'm going to show you now as well. So because I'm really not going to go and separate it there. And guys, really, this is my way of working. If your manual tells you go separate it there, please go separate it. But for me, I really played with this and it's not given me any problems whatsoever. So I'm going to just hook it there. I've got both threads together. I'm just threading them as two or as one thread up to that area. Let's just get that. Okay, so when I get to the bottom now, I actually go, I've got a little pin there. I go behind that pin, and what I like to do here then, and I like to really take my horizontal one. I'm just going to show you. I take my horizontal one for the right needle, my one that stands up to the left needle. Again, there's no rule for that. That's just something I do. My one that's going to go in the right needle, I put it behind that little bar over there. You can't go and use your automatic threader, so I'm just going to quickly just get this through my eye of the needle. And now when I do the next color, I don't put it behind this little bar area over there. I take it straight to my needle. So I separate my threads there. I find that if I have both of them going behind that little bar, it actually twists my thread sometimes. So I don't do that at all. So let me go and thread this one as well. And there we go. Just want to pull that through. If you look at the photo I'm showing you now as well, I'm taking it from the side, and you can see the one is going closer to the needle because it went into that area, and then my yellow is going straight from there into that area as well. So that is where I end up separating my threads. Now what we are going to check for, if you choose a stitch, as soon as you choose a stitch that's got a width to it, I have to make sure I'm not going to damage my presser foot or break a needle. So I've chosen just for now a zigzag. Look what happens. It's hitting my presser foot. So I know this stitch, if I don't go and change the width and take it down to a smaller width, I am going to be breaking my needle, because that needle is going to hit that presser foot, and sometimes we hit it so hard that we put the timing out of our machine. So now I've gone smaller in the width, and this is really for you if you don't have a double needle function on your machine. Every single stitch you are going to check. So now when I go down, I can see I am clearing, that left needle is clearing the presser foot. I'm turning the dial and I'm going to let it jump. Let's just go again. It jumps to the right, and I make sure I am clearing on the right. If it seems that this is really still very close to that presser foot, I might just go and turn it down a little bit more. I want an easy clearance. Okay, I don't want it just right next to the presser foot. Now I'm happy. Now I can go and sew whatever stitch I've chosen. So again, on your mechanical machine, you don't want to work with a 4mm. You cannot work with a 4mm when you do decorative stitches. You're going to look for a 2 or a 2.5. And usually your stitch width will be about a 2.5. Okay, and that is if you've got a 5mm width. So you have got to do this step. Now, if you've got electronic or computerized machines, automatically your machine, if you go choose that stitch, it's going to automatically alter that width for you. Now let's look at our decorative stitches. I've just gone ahead and done a couple. I had to stop myself, because really when you start playing with this and seeing the different effects that you get, you just want to carry on and try all your stitches with it. Now every time, the first row that you will see of each stitch, it was my normal setting on my machine. I just used my normal sewing machine needle, and whatever the width was when I selected the stitch, that's how I left it. So you can see this is a 9mm. So I took one from my cross stitches, I took one from my satin stitches, that is more like my geometric stitches that I have, and I even went and just did a normal practical stitch, which was my zigzag. This one is the triple zigzag, so it does form each stitch 3 times as well. So but it gives you a very dense look at the end of the day. Now every time my second row, if you're going to have a look at that, that one there and that one there, I used my double needle that is spaced 4mm apart. So you can actually see that obviously it would have narrowed my stitch width a little bit more. Can you see even on this one, look at how narrow this section is? And because of the needle spacing, I've got that little bit of a gap every time in between. You can even see it on the zigzag. There's more of a gap between the 2 zigzag stitches. Then I went and I put in my 2.5mm, and I told my machine I've got the 2.5 in. And look at this, because the needle is closer now, it allows for a wider stitch length. So it's almost, here we can see it's overlapped the stitches with the yellow and the red. But look how beautiful this one came out. They are sitting right next to each other. So compared from this to that, it is like totally a different stitch if I look at this. This one also looked quite different for me, but look at what happened to my zigzag. Can you see the spacing on the zigzag here? Here the zigzag is almost right next to each other, if you look at that. So every time I got a different look when I worked with my double needle. Again, guys, when I'm showing you this, please be cautious when you're working with your mechanical machine. If you don't have the stitch width that I have on mine, which is the 9mm, and you don't have the option that it will recalculate the stitches, you've got to be so careful. You've got to make sure that you are using the right needle, which I told you, go with a 2.5, and you are going to make sure that you set your width so that it won't hit the presser foot. Usually your width would be at about 2.5 to play with decorative stitches. Unfortunately, with our mechanical, we don't have all the options like we have with our computerized machines or the electronic machines. So, and also again, your options, if you've got a 5 or 5.5 width to compare to the 9mm width, again, you won't be able to do what I'm doing with the 4mm. It's really when I start getting my wider stitches, like the 7mm or the 9mm, that we will find on some of our machines now. But again, can you see what I can do? Now I've taken basically, and I've just taken 4 stitches here, but look at all the different looks that I created. So I want you to go and have fun. I really want you to go and look at what you have and go and make samples. If you are going to make a sample like this, go write down for yourself what was the stitch number, what width of double needle that you have in. So I will go and write that I had my 4 millimeter, my 2.5. So I would play around with that. But again, everything that we've done in last week's decorative stitches will apply to working with this. And remember, even if you're just doing a straight stitch for hemming with a double needle, slower speed. Please don't go and sew full speed. You are going to break your needle. You can really have fun, and you can take your 20 stitches that you might have that you've got on your machine and go and turn it into 40 stitches by just using a double needle. If you've got a computerized machine and you've got a lot of stitches, I've got bad news for you, because you've got hours of sewing that you are wanting to do on your machine, because that's how I ended up starting to play with these. I really want to go back and work and look at my quilt stitches that I can use, go and look at all my other stitches that I can use on this decorative with the double needle. For now, go get your machine out, go look for your double needles. If you don't have, you can always go to our online store. We keep everything that I do show you in my videos. We do have it in our online store. All you have to do is go to surferdesigns.co.za and then go and click under my haberdashery. It says shop haberdashery, and you will find double needles. You will find everything that I always use, stabilizers, anything like that. So be sure that if you don't have it in your stash, that you go to our shop and you go and look what we have there for you. That is it from me for decorative sewing. And next week, remember also, we are going to look at our foils. So if you haven't bought your foils yet, maybe look at getting that as well when you are going to buy your double needle. But I will chat to you then on Friday. Enjoy the rest of your week and happy sewing.